Welcome to the Hub of Champion, part of Believe Network, joined by Christian Arcand of WEEI. I am Shukri Wrights. Be sure to subscribe, comment, rate, and follow the podcast, and tell all of Boston sports fans to do the same. You can watch us on Believe TV across the country and in airports, and as well as on YouTube. Read the top Believe stories at si.com and follow us across all of our Believe socials. It is an absolute joy to have him back on the pod. I haven't had him back on the pod in a couple of years, at least. But it
Last
wasn't
time
on
you had
this one. It
me,
was on a different
it
one.
was me and Sean Silver. So this is the
Yes,
first
it
time you had
was.
just me in a while. Yeah.
Yeah, so like it's so yeah, that was an epic episode in itself. Like that's like towards the end of the shutdown at that time. But
Right.
Christian, how are you, man? Like it's like in this crazy days that is Boston sports with everything going on around the Celtics. How are you doing?
Living the dream, man. You know, this is the time of year. Celtics are in the finals, or they're about to be. You got OTAs starting, and
Yeah,
Red Sox better than I think a lot of people expected them to be. I'm still a little hurt about the Bruins, but you know what else is new? You get used to that after a while. But yeah, all in all, I'd say I think the Celtics are on the verge of something big. I think that's where a lot of the focus is. And if they blow it, then you know we get to talk about how big of frauds they are all summer. So either way, you got something to talk about, no matter what. But yeah, I do like this time of year. I like when spring kind of hits summer, and then you know the days get a little longer. I enjoy that. So yeah, I'm doing good, man. How are you?
I'm happy to hear that you're doing well. I'm doing good. I'm actually am missing Boston tremendously right about now. It hit me even more the night that the Celtics like swept the Pacers in the Eastern Conference Finals Game 4, and I was just thinking to myself, I know what's going on right now back in Boston, back home, and just the excitement, but also at the same time, this was expected. What
Yeah,
makes this time around different versus 2 years ago? 2 years ago, I don't think that was expected. Even though the Celtics got off to that 19-21 start 2 years ago under Ime Udoka, then they went on a historic run in the second half of the regular season, and obviously through the playoffs as well. But this time, this was expected, but all the more special because the Celtics, they have been the best team in basketball since day one. And Christian, when you're in the midst of getting ready for the NBA Finals, which starts officially a week from tonight, at the time of this recording, there are a couple of things that I look at the most when it comes to the Celtics. First and foremost, Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And I want to start there. If they win the championship, and it will be banner number 18 for this great Celtics franchise, how much will this championship change the perception of both Tatum and Brown, who have been knocking on the door for so long, and finally win their first championship together?
it'll change the perception completely. I mean, really, like right now, the perception of them is they're still considered not, you know, old players or anything, but they're not really young anymore. They're kind of right in their prime where they should be. And the perception is right now that they're good enough to get there, but not good enough to sort of climb the mountain. And this year's very important, Shukri, too, because the last 5 or maybe 6, one of the other champions in the NBA have been a different team. You're sort of aging out of the dynasty era now. It's been, you know, Golden State, Toronto, Milwaukee, Denver, you know, and sort of like these. It's not anybody's league right now, you know. Like Jokic may be the best player and he's got all the MVPs and stuff, but Giannis won 2 MVPs and then won a title. Jokic won 2 MVPs and won a title, and that sort of legitimizes all of these things. If you're in an era where you don't have to deal with LeBron in his prime on a super team, or you don't have to deal with the Warriors and Kevin Durant, and when you get to the finals every year, and that's sort of not part of it, you still have good teams you have to deal with. But look at the Final Four right now. I mean, none of those MVPs and the people I just mentioned made it this far. So it's really there for the taking with the Celtics, more so than I can remember. The only thing I'd compare it to maybe, and I hate to even do this, but the 2019 Bruins, you remember how they didn't have to face Washington. They didn't have to face Tampa Bay. Both of those teams got beat by, I want to say it was Carolina and Columbus. It was one of those two, whatever it was, whoever the Bruins beat that year. And, you know, they did a lot of the dirty work for them. So that's not to say that Indiana or the Cavaliers or anybody did the dirty work. It's just the difference is it was a bunch of injuries and best players getting injured. I believe that even if those best players played, that the Celtics would still be going to the finals this year. I think they were that much better than the other teams in the East. If Giannis and Dame Lillard played, maybe I wouldn't be saying that, because those are two guys on a team that I think was the only one that was really comparable with them in Milwaukee. But both of those guys got hurt, and that's just the way it's been this year. And that sort of speaks to another thing.
Yeah.
Outside of Porzingis, because you can't say this about him, but outside of Porzingis, these Celtics are very durable. They're playing a ton of games. Yeah. They're not breaking down with injuries. They're not having to, lose guys for long periods of time, again, other than Porzingis. But he's one of several people on this team who contribute in a major way, and he's not one of the two main pillars. So those guys have been healthy. Those guys have been productive. They haven't been perfect or anything in these playoffs, but they haven't needed to be so far. So in terms of what their perception will be right now, I don't think their perception is great. I think there's a lot of reason why the national dialogue around Tatum and Brown is the way it is. It's because they've come up short every year. Every year when they're supposed to be the favorites over a lower seeded Heat team, or having a 2-1 lead over the Warriors, or the other time they were a higher seed than the Heat, or whatever it is. I mean, you can count the different ways they've blown it, but that becomes your reputation. And so this would be huge for that. And conversely, as big as it would be for them to win the championship if they blow it, this is about, like I said, like the Bruins that year, you had your path paved for you right to the finals. And if you blow it now, it's going to be almost impossible for them to shake the reputation they'll get then, unless they win the next year, of course. But, it's going to be a long summer, going to be a lot of talk about how fraudulent they all are, how even with all these things breaking right for them, they still couldn't win. And if they end up losing to Kyrie, I mean, it's just, I don't even want to think about the way these things are going to go. I'm a Celtics fan. It's good for me professionally, obviously. It's something to talk about. From a Celtics fan perspective, and if you look around here, you see all my Celtics crap all over the wall. That would be devastating. I mean, absolutely devastating for not just those players, but for the franchise, for everything. I mean, that would just be a devastating outcome this year.
It would be, because I don't think you could have had a better path to the finals this year than the Celtics have. And I love the comparison you made between this year's Celtics to the Bruins of 5 years ago, because unfortunately they're looked at as the one team that absolutely let it get away. And I said it the night of when the Bruins lost to the Panthers in Game 6 at TD Garden. And I said that with every passing year, and we're now at 5 years since that 2019 finals, Stanley Cup Finals, that loss by the Boston Bruins in Game 7 at home at TD Garden to the St. Louis Blues, it gets even more painful. The Celtics, I look at and I say, you've had the best record in the NBA. You've gone 12-2 up until this point. There's nothing else but to do other than to just win your 18th championship in franchise history. But the national dialogue and the national perception, and I've seen this all across national sports media, whether it's ESPN, whether it's Sirius XM, which I've listened to, and even locally on the Sports Hub, and dare I say even EI sometimes. But I mean, who's really the better team? And it's just like, okay, I get all of that, but at what point do you say that even if, let's say, Dallas wins and they're playing Game 5 right now, Game 5 as we speak right now.
I got this. I got it on the background. What's the score?
If it's Dallas,
Dallas is up 18. So,
oh boy. All right, let's say it's going to be Dallas, guaranteed, unless they find a way to completely blow this thing up.
Well,
if Dallas wins this, and it's Dallas versus Boston in the finals, as we're all expecting at this point, the other part of it, and this is the second part now, is I look at Kyrie's return to Boston against the Celtics in the finals. How surprised would you be, considering just where he was 2 years ago, when he was with Brooklyn?
Sure, yeah.
When he was with KD and as well as James Harden. How surprised would you be in terms of his growth, seemingly, and the fact that he's not just a passenger on his Dallas Mavericks team? He's been their leader, and that's saying something, considering that they also have Luka Doncic as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big redemption arc for him if they win, which, I mean, it's going to be a tall order for them to do that because the Celtics, I think, are a more complete team than Dallas is. They are hot right now, though, and those two guys, I mean, listen, Luka Doncic is the best player. He'd be the best player in the series, I think. And I'd even maybe take Kyrie over Jaylen Brown. So we drafted the
Wow.
series the other day on the air.
So
And
wait,
I
you're
think
saying, wait, hold on, Christian. So you're saying you're willing to take Kyrie Irving as your best player right now over Jaylen Brown? Is that correct?
Well, I would say if like we were to draft the series, right? If it was Celtics
Okay.
and we're just going to draft like the players we want, we all pick Luka, then Tatum, then Kyrie, then Jaylen Brown. Yeah, I mean, I just listen. It's not like Jaylen Brown's not a good player, but Kyrie's won a championship before, and he's playing at I think a higher level right now. And that's not to say that Brown's not playing well. It's just Kyrie's always been a phenomenal player. I mean, he's so good. Like he's like frustratingly good. I remember in like 2002. His coach right now actually is who it was, Jason Kidd on the Nets. Back then, those Kenyon Martin, Kerry Kittles teams. Jason Kidd, I
Richard
hated him
Jefferson
so
too.
much. Yeah, Jefferson, all those guys, Keith Van Horn. Like I hated those teams because I hated Jason Kidd because he was so frustratingly good, and he was like a bad guy back then. You know, he had that thing with his wife, but like Kyrie is sort of the same, and not the same kind of thing, but he's like an a-hole too. And he's just easy to root against, and he did all this stuff in Boston and whatever. But I'll say this about Kyrie. I was watching Inside the NBA before Game 4, I guess it was, or Game 3, whatever it was. And they had like this prepackaged thing about him, this little production piece. And he was talking in it, and you didn't hear any of that defensiveness or that defiance or sort of that, you don't know basketball, I'm going to tell you everything. This is how everything is. You know how Kyrie is. I mean, it's just the way he talks. There wasn't any of that. It was all about the team. It was all about Luka and how they're such a good duo, and these other guys who have stepped up, and Coach Kidd's so great, and blah blah blah, and all these things. And I'm just sitting there going, "Who is this guy?" Like I never heard him talk like this. This isn't, even back when he was in Cleveland, he wasn't like this. When he was in Cleveland, he was a pain in the ass. He was a pain in the ass here in Boston, and it's a couple years in now with Dallas, and it seems like everything's going great. Of course, they're going to the finals, and I said this on the air the other day. As soon as things start to break down, like say the Celtics get up big on them, I don't know if that same Eddie Haskell routine is going to be there, but it does seem like he does seem like a different guy. I will say that, but people don't forget. And I also don't think people change. He might be putting on like a front here while the team's doing well, but I don't think people fundamentally change that much over the course of like a couple of years. I still think that same old Kyrie's in there, but it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how the crowd reacts to him. How he plays, how he reacts to Boston, all that stuff. I mean, I think that's a huge storyline. It'll probably be the biggest one.
Oh, no question. Which is why, like, I was actually talking about this last night on a different pod that was not on my pod. I was on guessing someone else's, and I was saying that I can't think of an athlete who is more hated in Boston right now and has been the last 5 years more so than Kyrie. I just can't. And I think that's saying something when you walk around the city of Boston, because I remember this in 2021, just as things were starting to open up again. I can't remember seeing an athlete that was more reviled, who had posters literally up and down Causeway with Kyrie's face on it. Like, I can't remember seeing anything like that with any other athlete, not even in New York, not even in Philly, nothing like that in those cities. But Boston, Kyrie being public enemy number one, and even still now, that 5 years later since he left the Celtics seemingly in ruins at that time, like definitely still has Celtic fans like up in arms over Kyrie still. But outside of Kyrie, I do think that there is something to be said about what Jason Kidd is doing as a head coach, because some Celtic fans may not remember this. He was part of that 2011 Mavericks championship team with Dirk Nowitzki, Jason Terry, and all those guys. He was a player then. He was on the last of his Hall of Fame career. Now he's coaching his team on the cusp of going to the finals. And you talk about, coaching matchup between Jason Kidd, Joe Mazzulla, who has done a lot of growing over the last calendar year, because a year ago, I eviscerated Mazzulla for his inability to make adjustments in game, and as well as knowing when to hell to call a freaking timeout. So when you look at these two coaches, who in your mind has the bigger edge, like between Jason Kidd and Joe Mazzulla?
I mean, I hate to say it, but it might be Kidd. He's been coaching a little bit longer. He has less to work with, and he's gotten his team past, some pretty tough customers there, which you can't really say about Missoula this year. And I think Joe Mazzulla has definitely matured and become, he's come along as a coach. He's a good players coach. I still question his plays and stuff like that too, like you were just talking about. I still think he messes up on timeouts sometimes. Don't always love his rotations, but I don't think it's been any detriment so far this year. I think this year he's mostly pulled the right strings and kind of pressed the right buttons. But, Jason Kidd, I remember he was a coach in Brooklyn. He lasted 1 year. They had a winning season, and they fired him anyway. And then he was, I forget where he went after that. The Bucks, maybe? He was with the Bucks.
He went to Milwaukee briefly. Yeah.
They didn't do anything. And then he was sort of not considered a head coach anymore. He became an assistant with the Lakers. And then they took another chance on him in Dallas, and it's worked out, which is to say, people's head coach especially, you don't always strike success right away. Sometimes you have to find the right situation. You have to find the right group. You have to find the right star that sort of aligns with you. And I think that, Kyrie, he was coached by another great point guard. He was coached by Steve Nash and did not care for that, did not take to it, didn't like Nash as a coach. Him and Durant and everybody wanted him out. And now he's playing for another Hall of Fame point guard, and this time it seems to really be working. So, it does go to show that sometimes these coaches are not in a great situation. They may be good at their job. They may be good at certain aspects of it, but really it's about connecting with your stars, connecting with the real decision makers on the team and in the league, if you think about it, and cultivating that as best you can. Like some older coaches are stubborn and just want to do things their way and don't want to kind of adapt to all these things. And players will, they'll get a coach. They'll throw a coach under the bus and faster than you can say boo, because it's easy to do that. It really is. I mean, it's easy for the owner to sort of look at it and say, well, the reason this is happening is the coach's fault. The GM in the front office, they don't want to blame the crappy team they put together, so they blame the coach. And that's often how they get scapegoated. So if you're a coach in the league, there's a lot of things you have to do. It's a balancing act to sort of hold your spot. And when things go badly, not get blamed for it or not, become the reason that everybody perceives, well, things will be different if we just fire this guy. Like that's part of it. And I think Kidd's done a decent job with that. I mean, listen, he's got his team in the finals here. They were in the conference finals 2 of these years, 2 of the last 3. I think he was there for all of them. So, I mean, that's impressive. That's an impressive job that he's done. And, he's done it with less than Missoula. Missoula inherited a very good team. And I think Brad Stevens has done a good job to keep adding to it. That's not to say Missoula's a bad coach, but I just think in terms of like how these things get looked at, you got to give it to Kidd.
Absolutely. And speaking of the Celtics, because there was a point that I really want to harp on. There's a reason why I've had this personal belief where if you're a fan, you're gonna be a fan. You're gonna be a fan. You have your favorites, but you don't get attached to players. And I'm talking about Marcus Smart here because I remember distinctly at the end of last season, after the Celtics lost Game 7 to the Heat at the Garden. And I was telling people they got to make major changes. If it meant you had to move Marcus Smart, you moved Marcus Smart. And there are people that were just, of course, emotional because they love Marcus Smart. And what does Brad Stevens do? Trade Marcus Smart. But who comes back in that trade? Jrue Holiday. And I mentioned somewhere else that I think
it was Porzingis. Porzingis came back for Smart. Holiday went for Malcolm Brogdon.
Oh, for Malcolm Brogdon, correct.
Isn't that how that went? I think that's how that went. Yeah,
like something like that. It was a multi-team trade,
right?
So, with the acquisition of Jrue Holiday, and I said earlier during the season to Justin Turpin, also of EEI,
Turp,
and I told him,
my man, love Turp.
I had him on a separate episode, and I was saying, in my opinion, at the time, I thought that Porzingis was the bigger acquisition, but in hindsight, the more I watched Holiday, I realized, Holiday actually was the bigger upgrade here over Marcus Smart. Because, and I tweeted this the other night during Game 3, championship players making championship type plays. Yeah. So, Christian, in your mind, how big of an acquisition has Jrue Holiday been for this team, and how much of a difference maker he has been, not just only as a leader, obviously, but as well as the plays that he's making that's making big differences in these games?
Yeah, I mean, that's really it. Like, I thought he had a good season, not a great one, But in these
Yeah.
playoffs, he's been unbelievable. He's been spectacular, and not just putting up big games. He's had a couple of like near triple doubles with like 26 points, which you haven't seen much of that this year from him. These plays he makes at the end of the game, unbelievable plays. The steal he had on Gebhardt or whatever that guy's name was, Nebhart.
Newhart, yeah.
That offensive rebound he had at the end of game 4, the defense he plays in general, the passes that he had, just the decisions that he makes. It's because he understands what his role is, I think, in a way that Marcus Smart never really did. And I kind of understand that. Like, a lot of people rip on Smart for that, and I've probably been, guilty of this. But when they were all playing together at first, Brown and Tatum had Kyrie on the team, and they looked up to Kyrie, and then Kyrie left, and Smart sort of filled that void of the vocal leader in the locker room. And you may look at that, in hindsight and say, well, Marcus Smart wasn't good enough to be that. And it's true, maybe. Like, he was never a great player. He was a good player at certain points, but he was never great. But you also got to remember that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum at that time were like 21 and 20 years old. So it's like, they were young and impressionable, and Marcus Smart was a big personality, and he just sort of stepped into that role when those two guys were kind of reluctant to do it. And then he stayed in that role, maybe a little longer than he should have. Yeah. And now here they are kind of on their own. And I say on their own, they're surrounded by great players, but in terms of like letting them lead the way, that's been an important thing that Drew Holiday's done. I mean, Drew Holiday's an older player. He's won a championship. He could take over that role, but he hasn't. He's sort of let Brown and Tatum do it and then led by example. And I think that that's a big difference, leading by example as opposed to the Marcus Smart leadership of throwing water bottles in the locker room and flipping chairs over and pushing the coach out of the way and doing the timeouts on the whiteboard. That's a different way of leadership than what Drew Holiday does. You wouldn't show up Missoula like that, you don't think. And it's really reflected in the play. Not to mention the fact, Derek White was starting to usurp at the end of games anyway, Marcus Smart's minutes and his value. You remember last year against Miami, there was that game where White and Pritchard played down in the fourth quarter, and they won the game. And afterwards, Smart wasn't happy about it. You could tell he was not happy that they went to those guys, even though those guys are better scorers. They're better offensive players. And you could tell that rubbed him the wrong way because he's like, hey, I'm a leader on this team. I'm a leader. So to make that move was a big deal for Brad Stevens. It wasn't just trading a good player away. It was trading away really the soul of the team in a lot of ways. But it was something that needed to be changed. It needed to be tweaked a little bit. And I think he did it about as well as he could, bringing in Holiday, which was the other trade. I mean, that was Brogdon, but all of that I sort of consider one big thing. And it really worked. And listen, Celtics fans, if you had said last year at any point in the season, really, I think next season the Celtics should trade Marcus Smart for Kristaps Porzingis, Celtics fans would have been, you don't know basketball. You're a casual. You're this, you're that. All the shit they say. You know what Celtics fans are like. They're ridiculous. They're the whiniest fans sometimes. And I'm a Celtics fan too. I whine too. But they're ridiculous sometimes. And now here they are. They did it. They did that exact thing. That exact thing they would have laughed at. They would have, mocked and said, oh, no, you wouldn't do that. Brad Stevens would never do that. Porzingis sucks. Smart's the man, blah, 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 blah. And now here it is, and it's working out great, and you just don't hear that stuff, which, by the way, I'm happy about. I think it paints Celtics fans in a bad light when they get all whiny and bitchy about stuff like that. So, personally, I'm happy about that. But, yeah, I think Brad Stevens has done a fantastic job, and everything's really clicked this year.
And last question I'll ask is I got to touch on Derek White, because Derek White, I think, has been the singular biggest story for this team this year. And I know this team has been full of big stories, but I think the biggest one is the growth of Derek White. Because if you go back and you look at what Derek White was from last year, this growth through last year's playoffs, including making the game-winning play in Game 6 in Miami, that won the game and forced a Game 7 in Boston, to what he's been this year. How amazed are you when you look at Derek White's growth as a player and just how invaluable he's become in terms of what he provides offensively, and as well as the trade that was made just 2 short years ago from San Antonio to get Derek White? How much more has that trade blossomed into what it is even more so now for this team?
Well, I like that trade right away because Derek White went to University of Colorado, which is where I went. So I always root for Colorado guys. And he had a good story, too. He was playing in like junior college. And then he grew like 3 inches and he transferred over to CU, and the rest is history there. I think he was picked I want to say he was picked either late in the first round or early second round by San Antonio. And he was kind of toiling away out there. He's a good player on a bad team. And I like it when the Celtics pick up guys like that. I like it when they sort of do that. And he's taken this opportunity and really done a tremendous job with it. Here's a stat that I cannot get over. In that last series with the Pacers as a team blocked 12 shots as a team. Derek White blocked 9 shots himself in that series.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy?
It is crazy.
Like, he's a shake taller than me. I'm 6'2". He's like, he's out there like Mutombo. He's blocking everybody's shot. And he doesn't just block guard shots. He was blocking Siakam. He was blocking everybody. It was ridiculous. And that's just a small part of what he does. I mean, he's a good shooter. He can bring the ball up. His defensive prowess. I mean, it's the second year in a row he's been all defense. So, like, you don't miss Marcus Smart that much when you see the progression of Derek White, the addition of Drew Holiday. They already sort of were, I think, paving the way for this. And yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd call White the biggest story of the year, but he's definitely, because it may end up being that in the offseason because he's the only one that's not extended. So I hope that they do that. I hope they keep him around. If it was like a choice between him or Holiday, who they'd rather keep or sign to a long-term deal, I might have picked White there. As great as Holiday's been in the playoffs, White's a little bit younger, and it just sort of seems like he's got more to offer at this point. But that's, I mean, what a great problem to have. Hopefully, Wick allows Brad Stevens to keep him, and I think he will. Whatever you think about the Celtics and the ownership group, Wick Grossbeck is spending on this team more than any other owner. He's basically letting Brad Stevens do whatever he wants to keep this team together. He trusts him, and Stevens has given him a reason to trust him. And I think that that's painting Grossbeck in a great light. And what I also hope, Shukri, is that it shames all these other owners into spending a little bit more. I hope, Kraft sees this and John Henry sees this and they go, you know what? This guy's kicking our ass. We need to start spending
the Jacobs too.
Like the Celtics. Jacob, like, it's amazing now how the Jacobs aren't the most miserly out of all the owners, because they always used to be back in the Ray Bork days in the 90s and stuff. When I was in high school, like, everybody hated the Jacobs for that because they pocket the money. They spend to the cap now. You look at the Red Sox, you look at the Patriots. They've been reluctant to do that. And I think that's reflected in sort of fan reaction. It's reflected in their standings and win totals. And I think that, in general, like, the buzz is down on them and it's high on the Celtics. And that's not a coincidence. That didn't just happen. That happened because you realized what you had. You decided you wanted to invest in it. You alerted the fans and sort of signaled to them, hey, this is something that we believe in and we're going to work hard to make as good as we possibly can. And fans respond to that. Fans respond to that in Boston. They respond to that in most places. But in Boston in particular, they can smell a rat. They can smell when you're not when you're saying some things and then not backing them up with your actions. And you can say that about Kraft and John Henry lately. And I hope Wick Grossbeck embarrasses them into spending. I hope that happens. I hope it's like a domino effect. I think that would be great. It'd be great for us. That's for sure.
I certainly hope so. And I look forward to having you back on the pod, like more likely probably after the NBA Finals. Christian Arcand of WEEI. Check him out on weekday afternoons from 2 to 6 on WEEI. Also on weekends on Sundays, he also has the Sunday service, which is a personal favorite of mine. And don't forget to check it out as well. Follow him on X at Christian Arcand as well. Christian, thank you for taking the time to hop on, man. Like, I appreciate you as always, for real.
Yeah, Shukri, it's always good to talk to you, man. This one flew right by. Have me on any other time. We can finish the conversation for sure.
Absolutely. We definitely will.
All right. See you.
Hold on.